Hello everyone, I love you and I hope you're all having a wonderful week. Today I'd like to talk about anger. And anger is an emotion that we all have experienced at some point in our lives. We get angry at ourselves, we get angry with other people, and unfortunately sometimes we get angry with God. And the Bible warns us throughout about the effects of anger and how anger is a sin. And so many of us Christians feel that as Christians, we should never feel or express anger because anger is always a sin. But that's not necessarily the case because we know that at times Jesus was angry too. But see, we often don't think of Jesus as being angry. When we picture Jesus, we think of him as being peaceful and calm, getting along well with others, and being willing to turn the other cheek. But we also can't overlook the fact that there were several times throughout his ministry that Jesus felt anger and expressed anger. And we know that he was angry at times with the Pharisees because they were hard-hearted and stubborn. And he was also angry with them because they mistreated people at times. But probably the most well-known example of Jesus feeling and expressing his anger was when he cleansed the temple. And that's found in Mark chapter 11, verses 15 through 17. And so I'll read that for us now. They came to Jerusalem, and he went into the temple and began to throw out those buying and selling. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves, and would not permit anyone to carry goods through the temple. He was teaching them, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations'? But you have made it a den of thieves." So we see that Jesus was clearly angry here. He expressed his anger physically by flipping the tables and turning over the chairs. But he also experienced his anger verbally because after he talks about it, the temple should be a house of prayer instead of a den of thieves. That my Bible has an exclamation point after that, which shows that Jesus was passionate. He was speaking with passion. And so as we observe how Jesus handled and expressed his anger, we can also learn valuable lessons about how we should be expressing our anger so that we can express it in a righteous way instead of a sinful way. And the first lesson we can learn is this: appropriate anger does not lead to sin. Appropriate anger does not lead to sin. Paul tells us in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26, "Be angry and do not sin." So that tells us that it is possible for us to feel and express anger without sinning. And that also tells us that anger as an emotion in itself is not a sin. But it's often how we express our anger that leads to sin. So let's look at some of the sinful ways that we often express our anger. When we're angry, we often use foul language and cuss. We also become physically violent by pushing or shoving other people or punching walls. We also have slander. We will slander others with our speech. We'll try to insult them and make them feel bad about themselves, spread rumors about them in order to hurt their reputation with other people. And then prolonged anger leads to bitterness, resentment, holding grudges, being full of hatred, and having a desire for revenge. All of these expressions of anger are sinful. And we see that Jesus was angry, but he never sinned because he expressed his anger righteously. He never did any of the things that we just talked about. He expressed his anger without sin. So appropriate anger does not lead to sin. Second, we see that appropriate anger has the right motivation. Appropriate anger has the right motivation. In other words, that's why are we angry? Whenever we feel ourselves getting angry, we need to stop and ask ourselves, why am I angry and do I have a right to be angry? Why am I angry and do I have a right to be angry? And the thing is, when most of us as humans, when we get angry for selfish reasons, for selfish motivations, and we get angry over petty things that we really shouldn't be getting angry over. So why do we get angry? We get angry when we're irritated. Someone or something is annoying us or bothering us, and so we end up getting angry. We get angry when we're impatient. Something's taking too long, and we get tired of waiting. We become impatient, and we get angry because we want it now. Also, we get angry when we get frustrated when things are not going our way. That's often when we get angry, is when things are not going our way and something's happening that we don't want to happen, and that's when we get angry. We also get angry when we feel slighted or disrespected, or when we take offenses too personally. And then finally, we may get angry when we feel entitled or that we deserve something, and then we don't get that thing that we feel that we deserve. That can make us angry too. So now that we know why we get angry, let's look at what makes God angry. Because what makes God angry should make us angry too. And so why does God get angry? What is God angered by? God is angered by sin. He hates sin, and we should hate sin too. God is very angry at the sin and the wickedness that is spread throughout this world. He's also angry when he sees injustice or oppression or mistreatment of his people. He's also angered when he is disrespected or mocked by others. And then finally, God gets angry when we practice idolatry. That is when we put something ahead of him in our life. When we worship something other than God. When something other than God becomes the most important thing in our lives. That's idolatry, and it makes God extremely angry. So why was Jesus angry? We know why we get angry, and we know what makes God angry. Why was Jesus angry? Jesus was angry because these people were disrespecting the temple. The temple was there so that people could come and worship God and offer sacrifices to God. But they were using the temple to make money. They had a business. They were running a business out of the temple. And so they were disrespecting the temple. And that made Jesus angry. Secondly, he was angry because many scholars believe that these people were price gouging and taking advantage of the people that were buying the animals. They were overcharging them for the animals. And so they were taking advantage and abusing and having unjust gain. And so that's why Jesus was angry. And see, we need to be like Jesus. We need to be angry for godly reasons. We need to be angry by the things that make God angry, not the selfish and petty things that usually make us angry. Third, we see that appropriate anger has the right control. Proverbs 29 verse 11 says, "A fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise person holds it in check." So appropriate anger has the right control. That means we need to have self-control in order to hold our emotions in check. We don't need to overreact when we feel angry and let our emotions overpower us. Because when we're out of control, when we don't have control over our feelings, that's when our actions become excessive. And we say and do things that we later regret and that we don't want to do. And we actually hate that we did it when we look back. And that's when we get too angry, we regret the things we do. And we do things that we just really should not do. And so in order to have self-control and manage our anger, we need to control our anger instead of allowing our anger to control us. And we see that Jesus was in complete control. None of his actions were excessive. He did not overreact. And you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, Will, didn't Jesus flip a table and flip chairs? Wasn't that out of control? And see, most of the time when we do stuff like that, we are out of control. We've lost control of our emotions. But that wasn't the case with Jesus. His actions were not excessive because his actions had a purpose. And the purpose was to cleanse the temple. He wasn't just reacting violently to his anger. He was resolving the issue. He was fixing and restoring the temple. So there was a reason why he did the things he did. And it was a good reason. But see, Jesus was in complete control. He knew what he was doing. So appropriate anger should always have the right control. And then finally, we see that appropriate anger has the right duration. That is, we are angry for the appropriate amount of time. So in order to have the right duration, we don't need to react too quickly to our anger, because when we react too quickly, our emotions are still high and we can't rationally handle the situation. We can't rationally handle our anger. And so what we do is we explode and we vent our anger. And so James chapter 1 verse 19 says, "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. So we should be slow to anger because we don't need to react too quickly by exploding and venting. But then on the other side, we also don't need to ignore our anger. We don't need to internalize and suppress that anger for a long period of time. So when we feel ourselves being angry, we need to take the time to step back and cool down. And oftentimes when we do that, our emotions are able to normalize. We're back in control of our emotions, and we realize that we may have overreacted and there really wasn't anything that we should be angry about, and so we're no longer angry. But then there's other times when we may still be angry. And if we're still angry, we need to resolve the issue calmly and address the issue calmly in a timely manner. We don't need to ignore, internalize, and suppress our anger inside because that leads to bitterness and that will eat us up inside. So we don't need to react too quickly, or we don't need to internalize and suppress our anger for a long period of time either. And we see that Jesus didn't do either of these things. We look in Mark 11, if we back up a couple of verses to verse 11, it says, Jesus went into Jerusalem and into the temple. After looking around at everything, since it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. So we see that Jesus did not react immediately. He took some time, he rested on it, and then he realized that this was still a problem, that they were still disrespecting the temple, and he needed to resolve the issue. So he returns the next day and cleanses the temple and returns in a timely manner and resolves the issue. And Ephesians 4, chapter 4, verse 26 says, do not let the sun go down on your anger. In other words, don't be angry for too long of a period of time. So we see that Jesus, although he experienced anger and felt anger, he was able to express his anger in a way that did not lead to sin. And we can too. In order for us to respond to anger in a righteous way, we need to make sure that our anger does not lead to sin. We need to make sure that we're angry for the right motivations. We need to ask ourselves, why am I angry? And do I have a right to be angry? And then we need to make sure that our anger has the right control and also has the right duration. And that's how we can make sure that we respond to anger righteously like Jesus did instead of sinfully like we normally do. Thank you so much for listening to this message and taking the time to listen to me. I pray this message blessed you. Make sure you tune in next week. I'm sure Tracy's going to have another great message for us. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and God bless you.